So we're so thrilled to bring this next guest to the Rail Talk studio. He's a 4-time Breeders' Cup winning jockey, over 1,900 wins, over $100 million in earnings. He's also an awesome analyst when you see him on TV. Rajiv Maragh, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
We're so thrilled to have you. It's such an opportune time with a lot of jockey news, and I think it's so interesting to hear your perspective because you've seen it both ways. You've seen it both on horseback and as an analyst from the third or fourth floor or whatever. There was a lot of controversy about the Preakness and the incident at the top of the stretch with journalism and Umberto Rispoli and Flavien Prat and goal-oriented. I honestly don't have a strong take because I don't ride horses. It seemed to me like Umberto was trying to kind of go through a hole that wasn't there, but Flavien didn't make it easy on him. How did you see it both as a jockey and an analyst?
Well, we're just jumping right in and put Raj in the hot seat, huh?
He said anything.
We don't waste time.
I'll say this. It's a tough, I feel like it's poor etiquette for a jockey to say, certain things, an active jockey like myself. So I don't really want to step on any toes. I mean, all the guys that were involved in this situation are personal friends of mine. And also, in the jockey community, I don't want to say too much. However, I can compare this to something that you guys that have never ridden a horse and the general public might be able to make their own perspective of it. So imagine you're driving down the highway on a 2-lane highway and a couple hundred yards up the highway, it's going to open up to a 3-lane. But currently there's 2 lanes. Lane number 1, there's a Toyota going 40 miles an hour. 1 car length behind him, barely behind him, in lane number 2, is another Toyota that's tailing him, but in the other lane. Here comes a Ferrari with a guy, revving up behind, and there's only 2 lanes in front of him. He's looking to try to pass both those cars because he's in a Ferrari and he can just go by the Toyotas anytime. But the Toyota, there's not sufficient passing lane, and the Ferrari doesn't want to wait till it goes into a 3-lane to go into the 3rd lane. So now the Ferrari runs up behind the Toyota in lane 1, and all of a sudden, he starts decelerating. He goes from 40 miles an hour to 35, and he's about to rear end him.
Right.
So he decides that what is his decision to make? He got an option. Option A, slam on the brakes and don't rear end this Toyota. Or option B, swing into lane number 2 when there's already another car there. Who's wrong? Is it the guy in lane 2 that's wrong for not moving out of the way when the Ferrari's barging through? Or is it the Ferrari guy that's saying, hey, man, just get out of the way. Your car is too slow. Mm-hmm. You guys can make the judgment. But that's the situation that they were faced in. And also, there's also a competitive part of this, too, that's saying, hey, this is a horse race, right? Yeah. So... if I'm on the highway and this is my personal take on it, and I'm in lane number 2 and I'm driving that Toyota, I'm saying, why does this guy think his time is more important than mine? Like, I got to move out of the way because you're driving the Ferrari. Man, wait your turn for the 3 lanes to come or sit your ass in the traffic. That's me personally. So, that's what I would do. So, and I feel like that's kind of the best way that I can take this into perspective. And then from that, anyone can make their decision. Right. But the rule in horse racing was violated by the horse on the inside because you cannot you cannot impede another horse to create room when it wasn't there, and there wasn't room.
Okay.
So the bottom line, that's it. I don't want to say anything more.
Yeah. No,
that's a great analogy. That's an awesome analogy.
That paints a really good picture. So Raj, how much communication is there during the course of a race between the jockeys? I mean, you give, for your racing analogy there, for your driving analogy, I should say there, in that scenario, we're all sitting in the cockpit. We have multiple mirrors so we can kind of see what's going on behind us. Those luxuries are not available when you're on a horse. So is it the jockey that's coming up in the Ferrari in this example? Is he yelling and screaming on your left or move out of the way, or what communication is going on? And B, if that's normal communication, how effective is that when there's 100,000 people screaming and yelling? And is it able to be transmitted, that those instructions?
Great question. So for part B, the big difference with riding amongst a pool of top class, world class jockeys versus a pool with mix of inexperienced jockeys or jockeys that hasn't been in that situation is when you're riding against the best jockeys in the world, there's actually less communications going on because each person is so accountable for their horse. They're usually in full control. They know where they're at. They know where to position their horses and how to navigate tight quarters. And because everyone is at that level, you're actually not wanting to let people know where you're at and present yourself. So if I was coming from behind, I wouldn't be honking like, hey, I'm coming through if I'm going to try to slip through a narrow opening because I'm fully accountable. I know that there's a narrow opening or whatever the case may be. So the bigger the better the colony of jockeys are, there's a lot less talking and communication. The only time you hear jockeys at the high level communicating a lot is when it becomes a point where the horse is uncontrollable. So, where it's like the very few and far between, but you're in situations where exhausting your best skills and everything, you're just in a bad spot and you need help. And that's usually the only time. When you go into different circuits or amongst a pool that's mixed with inexperienced jockeys, you'll hear a lot more yelling and screaming or pleading for stuff out of desperation because they're out of control. And a lot of time it's self-inflicted. Right. So, at a big level like the Preakness, you probably wouldn't be trying to give away your spot. But if you get desperate, you'd probably, start yelling because you're seeing the floor, you know what I mean? And stuff. So in addition to that, like you're saying, there's a loud place, screaming, yelling, it's a lot going on. So I don't know what the communication was like in that scenario, but I would expect that Umberto would not be saying to Prat, give me a chance until he's like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah,
I'm in a spot now that I can't, I can't get out of. And, just please move out of the way.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right. Yep.
Wow. Yep. Yeah. No, that's super interesting. Another hot topic on jockeys in the news was the fine of Junior Alvarado for overstriking with the whip during the Derby. $62,000. Supposedly, it can get appealed down to $31,000. We had Lisa Lazarus on the show last week. Created a lot of stir on racing Twitter, and I thought that your response was super thoughtful. So, I'm curious your reaction to that. Like, where should we stand on the crop rules as opposed to where we are now?
Where we should stand. So without going into all the reasons why I come to this, because we can dig deep. I mean, this is you can open a Pandora box of things and it just keep going down to the reasons why. However, ultimately, the rules that are written now, this arbitrary number of 6 strikes, that is put into every race, into every scenario, is total overcompensation to protect a perspective of people who aren't even the core supporters of the product of horse racing, and you're penalizing the core product of horse racing, right? So in the NFL, if you go back, when there was head-to-head contact, right, and it was causing all these concussions and head injuries to the athletes, right, the NFL didn't jump up and do this knee-jerk reaction and say, hey, let's now turn this into touch football, 2-hand touch, right? They assess the situation and realize that there's no room for head-to-head contact, right? We have to be really strict on that because there are brain injury, all these different things that can happen. So we need to get better helmets, but we also need to enforce a strict no head-to-head contact policy. We didn't stop playing tackle football, right? Tackle football, because if you take tackle football and turn it into 2-hand touch, the effect of that is you turn your product upside down. Horse racing is a pari-mutuel gambling product, competitive sport. utilizing the crop to inspire your horse to compete is actually a skill that we as jockeys have developed year over year when we utilize it the right way. There is zero room for abuse of the crop. However, overcompensating and doubling down on it, it's just going to devalue our racing product, our competitive product, to appease instead of educate. We have created crops that have so been advanced from 20 years ago when I started riding that has very minimal to no effect on a horse. There is no data, there's no science that backs up cutting to 6 to do what? For safety.
Yeah.
There's actually, contrary to that, there is a case could be made that it's unsafe to limit a jockey to 6 whips because 6 strikes, because if you're in a position where you already use the 6 strikes and now it's a safety and you have a split of a second to make a decision and you don't use it in a case that you could actually, end up in a bad situation. So I think we need to come to some common sense rules that is backed by data, backed by science, and also by professional experience from jockeys. The 6 strike that they're saying that, well, the jockeys were a part of it. That's total bullshit. What they did is they gave us 2 horrible options. And they say, take one. It's like you say, this person is starving to death. Here are your options. No food or 1 breadcrumb. Well, 1 breadcrumb is better than no food, right? But 1 breadcrumb doesn't suffice. Why can't I get a full meal? And so we need to look at making the crop rule based on the competitive sport and not abusing the crops.
Right, that's what I mean. That's my follow-up question. Is there a number that makes sense?
Well, if I said that number, it wouldn't be completely fact-based because we should combine the 3. We should look at reports from what are you trying to affect by limiting the crop or making that model. So you look at what you're trying to accomplish, and then you go back and say, well, what supports that? Right? So how does the science support that? How does the data support it? How the professional experience support that? You combine that, you fuse that, and you come up with a model that's a common sense model. I can tell you off the spur of my head from my professional experience, and I'll tell you why. I believe that it should be framed as within a certain furlong, you have a cap on the amount of whips. And the skill to it is that a horse, you can inspire a horse. You don't necessarily, the best jockeys in the world, when they come down inside the stretch, you'll see them switch from the right to the left. And you kind of, it's another just a surprise. The horse gets flagged on the right and he reacts from it, he goes forward. And after a while, you re-inspire them and a surprise from the left. These are horses, right? So I would say 4 strikes cap per furlong, right? So from the quarter pole to the 8 pole, once you use 4 strikes, you can't use 4 more strikes until you get to the 8 pole to the wire. So, 4 strikes per furlong cap. And the reason why I say 4 is 2 on the right, 2 on the left. 2 on the right, 2 on the left, right? That kind of, and I'm not saying that is right, but that would where my starting point would be. Most jockeys don't use the crop before that because it would be squeezing your gas pedal too early, squeezing that nitros out of the tank, and then you'll be running on fumes late. So the generic way how we ride horses, and because every horse is different, but there's a very common model. You come out the gate, you utilize the crop to get them going 1 or 2 or 3 times, depending on the horse. Then they get in a rhythm. You don't even use the crop anymore. And as the race advanced, quarter pole to the stretch is when you use the crop again.
Right.
Right.
So Raj, when you say, you mentioned before that the crop has minimum to no effect on the horse because it's so different than it was 20 years ago. Are you finding that the horses are reacting from the crop now, or is it just like a gnat on their ass at this point because they don't even notice it because it's so minimally effective at this point?
Yeah, it's not a gnat, and I'll tell you why. The crop doesn't need to be hard and strong,
Right,
for them to react. In fact, many horses, if you just even touch them with a finger on their flank, if they know that you touch them, or if they feel it, they'll jump forward, because the effect is really like if you go back in time, a horse is a wild animal. They jump forward when the predators attack them from behind, and they jump forward and they kick. So
right.
a horse will, you touch them on the back, you don't need to really hit them for pain, for hard. Right. So the crops that we have now is that perfect blend of enough that they actually know that you did something, right? And without hurting them.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a fly swatter.
Okay.
They react, but it's minimal to no impact.
Gotcha. I mean, just a quick follow up, because you mentioned we got to educate, and I think that's true. Like, I'm not in favor of getting rid of the whip entirely. Like, just because someone who's watching racing who knows nothing about it thinks it looks cruel. How? This is another tough question because you're not the CEO of racing yet. How do we educate people on this kind of stuff? Because we have such a short window when they're actually paying attention. I think that's part of the problem.
Before we can educate people outside, we have to model ourselves inside. There's no education to the outside public when we internally don't even have a clue or one common perspective. Everyone is pulling in different directions. So you can't educate someone if the people internally that's even creating the rules don't even know what to do. What are they going to educate about a 6-crop rule now? What are they going to say? Why did we come up with 6 crops? Because, well, we heard that some countries use 6 crop and some use 100. So we took 6 or 0. If you ask the authority right now that implemented 6 strike, ask them why, and you educate that why, right? That's what you're going to educate. Why do we have 6 crops? But there's no reason for the why. So how can you educate? So create that why first. Let's create the why. Why do we use X number as the crop? Why do we do it this way? And then you build that funnel of education to the public outside. And you also educate inside, because jockeys, trainers, owners, do you guys know why it's 6?
No, but like that's, if we implemented your idea and had 2 per side per furlong, how would you answer that question if someone said, why is it that number?
Well, now I go from making rules to being marketing, but but it would just be there's many different ways to create a funnel of education, right? The first part of that falls under the marketing aspect, right? And the first part of the education is when you create that awareness. Let's not be shy about it. Let's put it at the forefront. Let's not bury it and be reactive to somebody being upset about the whip effect to say, okay, let's answer that question now, right? Let's be proactive and create a whole system to say, we are using crops. These are the crops that we use, and this is why we use crops. So the first day before if you're a new person and you've come into the racetrack for the first time and you've never seen a horse race, you should already know what to expect. And you don't just come in and see a horse coming by and like, oh my God, they're whipping the horses. These people are evil, wicked, right? Because there is no proactiveness into making that at the forefront. That education.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I still think it'd be hard to quantify scientifically how many strikes and from what side is the most logical way to go. I don't know how you would do that. So I think, again, not defending any side of this argument, but I think that starting with some rule that was based on on a previous Commonwealth, in this case Kentucky, that approved it, which is horse capital of the world. You make the argument, and adopting that 6-strike rule, makes sense. But certainly to have more feedback now, just like everything else that's been going on, we have a set of rules, and then if it's not working, be able to come up with other ideas or other backing as to why we need to make alterations, whether it's reducing fines or increasing safety, alignments, whatever it is. But this rule seems to have been a lightning rod and generated a lot of conversation, both from internally and externally. And I think, unfortunately, Raj, we've kind of used up our social license as an industry, and the perception is driving this more so even than science could. So when you say, hey, people come in for the first time and they see us, quote unquote, whipping or striking the horses, if they're faint of heart, or don't understand that it doesn't have a real physical effect on the horse, from a pain standpoint. That's their first initial reaction, and that makes them maybe back up a little bit. So do we go with something like you said? If I use my hand and touch a horse on its flank, it's going to accelerate or reaccelerate because of that common language that I have with a horse. Is that just you as a top flight jockey that has that ability? Or is it, hey, anybody worth their salt in the jockey colony should be able to do that? But John, I got 2 Toyotas and a Ferrari on my ass as I'm going down the lane. And sometimes I don't have the ability to, or the wherewithal to be able to use my hand versus a piece of equipment.
Right. Well, the hand comparison, it's just to show that if the horse gets the touch, it would progress, but it's not practical to reach back while you're riding a horse going forward and touch their butt, right? Because you just don't have the scope on your hands to be able to hold.
So some equipment is needed.
Right.
Some equipment is definitely needed.
So you need that equipment.
Okay. For safety.
Right. Because it's not practical to push the horse forward with your hand extended forward and be able to it's physically impossible.
Yeah,
right?
to be able to steer and control.
To push it. So you need the length of the crop.
Yep.
And it works. So there's no need to fix something that's not broken, right? We don't need to invest into too much and going down that pipeline to fix something that ain't broken.
Right.
So that's why I would say stick with the crop and kind of look at it. But and I 100%, to go back to the first point that you made, we need to have rules. Because it cannot be a free-for-all.
No.
Look,
exactly.
when I'm talking about 20 years ago when I started riding, right? We could put a penny inside a popper that's already leather made and make it even hit harder.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Not saying that
you would actually you'd see welts. Sometimes you'd see welts on the horse.
You'd see welts on the horse. And people turn a blind eye to that. And I'm going to say this 100% out there. HISA, the concept of that, it's the best thing that's happened to horse racing in a long time. We need reform. We need remodel. We cannot sustain a product and keep going down. Look, our industry is going through some growing pains, and we're going to continue. I mean, there is no quick fix solution. Like, well, you guys asked me a question like saying, well, how do we educate and how should we educate and what do we actually do to educate? There's no quick fix answers to those things. It's a whole remodeling the system. And it's integral that there's a HISA or companies like that who does it and does it to also be able to push the sport forward. I feel like one of the consensus that the horsemen have right now, the people that have invested in the sport, about HISA, one of the fears that they have is that they're not actually there to help propel the sport forward. They're just there to make rules to remodel the sport. And I think that's what scares them. It's not that they don't see the value in what HISA can bring when it comes to safety and those things. But if you ask, the people that are living it, that are losing, that are getting hefty fines, losing their livelihoods, and seeing the sport continue to decline when it comes to race days and stuff like that, they're fearful that the agenda isn't to actually make the sport stop contracting and start growing again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we also need to understand that that people see the value in HISA, but we also want to make sure that it's for horse racing to reshape and grow forward.
Bro, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and I do think that there needs to be some short term pain for long term gain with all the bad actors that we've had in this sport, and I think that that's kind of what we're going through right now. But yeah, I love you having your perspective on this. I want to ask a personal question because you were one of my favorite riders when you were riding in New York. Thought you were one of the most underrated riders in the game. You had some significant injuries. You went to TV for a little bit and did a great job there. Did you always know that you were going to come back to the saddle? Was it just that you had that fire in you? Like what was that process like through the rehab and then eventually getting back to riding?
Well, I never announced the retirement.
Right. Oh, I know. It was just, we were curious.
So what really happened that the mainstream doesn't know why I stopped riding. When I came back into the business and so forth, resurfaced, they thought it was because of my injuries, but actually I had recovered from my injuries. I went and I wanted to establish myself outside of horse racing. Mm-hmm. During COVID, I was kind of hit in the face with the fact that, look, I'm a jockey. That's all I've done since I was 18 years old. The industry was almost taken away, man. 85% of the racing was shut down. And it really, I looked around, I had my firstborn child, it was 2020, and my family and everything. I'm like, if horse racing wasn't there, what would I do? And I saw to myself that as an athlete, we always talk about, when we're done doing this part, being an athlete, what do we do next?
Right.
And I said, man, that's actually a reactive way of thinking. Why don't I establish my next path now? So that when I am done riding, that's already in gear.
Right.
See? So I needed to educate myself outside of horses. I didn't go to college. I didn't do all that. I looked around and I thought about, what do I love if horse racing didn't exist? I did an odyssey planning, and I thought about, if horse racing didn't exist, what would I be doing? And I saw that I love technology. I feel like utilizing technology to kind of streamline inefficiencies in the world. I walk around and I'm like, why do people do things like this when you could do it like this? And how can I, get myself involved in that? So I looked around and I kind of looked in my Rolodex of people that I know in that field. And one of my cousins, he's a senior cybersecurity director at Microsoft, and he's also a horse owner. And we spent a lot of time together. When I first moved to New York as an apprentice, I used to sleep on his floor when he's in the bed. He was in the Marines and he's, doing that. And I kind of told him about my long-term vision outside of horse racing. We obviously know my success at the time in horse racing. And I pitched him some ideas. We discussed some stuff. And I came up with this e-commerce model. We named it Road Jockey. So that was my first company that I founded. And I founded that company under the premise that I was going to spend 2 years, learn about technology, learn about business development. And instead of going to college for 2 years, I would have something tangible out of it. So moved to Jamaica for a year and a half, built out Road Jockey, which is an e-commerce marketplace that facilitates delivery. It became a second product. Now it falls under the umbrella of Cyber Jockey, which is our consulting firm that specializes in tech development. Because what I realize is there's a lot of people who have ideas, but they cannot take it to life because they're busy in their day-to-day stuff.
Right.
And there's so many pillars of building a company, building a business. It's not just about having an idea. It's not just about financial resources. You know, you need, you know, all these different pillars of support. And if you could come to one place and just bring your idea and we can take it to life, utilizing these different pillars inside of our network, then other athletes like myself who don't want to give up our day-to-day. I had to stop riding for 2 years to learn this. What if I could go somewhere and someone can build me an app just out of my idea?
Right.
And so right now, Cyber Jockey, we have 4 different industries that we have created softwares and apps and all that. And I'm actually heavy invested into the technology world. And we have a horse racing product as well called MetaStride that Cyber Jockey powers,
Right.
which is it's GPS technology, tracking horses, training. So, you know, a trainer and owners, they can be anywhere in the world and like, you know, be able to assess their horses' progress and stuff.
Wow.
Now that I'm back to riding, my partner and I, we're trying to figure out how we can bring on the best people in the world so we can be scalable. We're not quite scalable yet because our technology makes us be able to be way efficient with less people because that's the power of technology. But we are like sitting down right now and thinking about there's so much value of what we have and so much opportunity. I'm riding. I cannot be in it. I can work on it a little bit, but we're just trying to build out the framework. We already have the framework. We're just trying to put the people in place to continue to scale this. So that's the reason why we keep it a little private. Most of our clients are like, hey, I know you're doing this. Like a trainer, how MetaStride came apart, there was a trainer that had an idea for 8 years. He's a construction owner. So he's not always at the barn. His assistant trainer is his main guy. And he goes, you know, I've been trying to get to see my horses. I'm tired of using feelings and emotions by what my help is saying, how my horses are trained. I need real data. How do I do that? And based on that, we built him this whole thing. But that's a personal person that knew me and through that. But one day we're going to be scalable where you're going to be able to come to our website and, you know, become a partner or client.
That's fascinating. That's awesome. I mean, it's great to see you back in the saddle, but it's also great that you have these other avenues for your ideas. And it's just great to talk to you, Raj. You're such a thoughtful guy, and we really appreciate you giving us so much insight from the jockey seat and then from the analyst seat as well. So appreciate the time, Raj.
Yeah, man. And if I sound like I got upset about the whip stuff, it's because I have 7 days of suspension and 3,000 of fine in the pipeline for going to whip over in a nose-to-nose battle.
Right.
So it's affected me, and I don't feel by any means like I'm an abuser of a horse. Like, I just, you know,
we get it.
Did you win the nose-to-nose battle? Is the question.
Every time it's because I'm trying hard to get the best place, and then I finish second, and then afterwards I'm like, how stupid are you?
It's all good.
You don't realize? Well, I can't count the whips that I'm riding because I'm thinking about threading the eye of a needle.
Exactly.
Right.
The only bad decision you've made, Raj, is not coming to Monmouth this summer. That's the only bad decision you've made. Since you come back, you've been golden as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know. I don't know if Orsino explained to you that we were going to give you first ride at Monmouth.
He said, but the thing is, like, you know, the family.
You got a family,
already,
I know.
And I'm gonna touch on that just quickly. I mean, we gotta run. Here's what it is. My son is 4 years old. He's in school now in Florida at our home. It's the logistics of taking him out of school to go in May to Monmouth and finding school in there and keep jumping him back and forth to school. Yep. It's not practical. And I'm not going to separate myself from my family. Like every day, my goal for my life is to come home to my wife and kids. You know, and I know that some days we got to do a day or two or a week or so in big terms, but you know, that's just our model for our life.
Yep.
And it was just impractical. So we kind of like the idea of trying to go to the highest level and try to advance my career, because ultimately, like, my 5-year plan is very ambitious as a jockey.
Right.
This is just the starting point to build the traction so that I can have some leverage. And when I'm presented with opportunities like that, John, it's hard to say no. Like, I want to go ride for DJ Stables.
I get it. I get it.
The Sandman, and, you know, getting closer and closer to riding horses like that.
Yeah.
But also, you know, it's a double-edged sword.
I get it. I'm a family guy too. I understand exactly what you're saying. And look, if you take the kid out of that level of school, he's going to miss all of his trigonometry. I mean, I understand it's very important that you know, the education process.
You don't understand. Like, you might. This is my son right now. He's talking about 100,000, a million, a billion, a trillion, and then a zillion. Dad, is there any number that comes after a zillion? I said, it goes to infinity.
Yeah, it's a zillion six. Come on, it's a
zillion six. I'm like, the numbers are endless. Stop with it, Luca. I'm done with that. We're gonna go all day.
It sounds like you have a new business manager.
Oh man, I'm priming him up.
Yep, good.
The one thing I'm scared of, though, if I give him too much power, he might fire me.
He might fire you, exactly.
Hostile takeover coming.
CEO in training. Awesome.
That's right.
All right, Raj. That was awesome. So great, bro.
Great talking to you guys, man.